That's where I click leave meeting, right?
That's the one.
I don't want to be involved. So obviously with the advent of 20 years since the Agile Manifesto, 25 years since Scrum was introduced to the world, and all the other things that have been going on, and we can trace our history back to the dawn of time. I think today what people seem to be interested in a lot is what else is Agile for other than software development and software delivery. And I think that the phrase Agile for everything and Agile for everyone sort of comes to mind as a little mini mantra, if you will. Where are you guys sitting on that subject?
I think Alistair, what's happened is many companies that have just vanished over the last sort of 10, 20 years or more, and with things that keep hitting us like COVID, etc. I think what's happening is that there's a demand for this kind of new way of thinking, faster response ways of thinking, and businesses are realizing that actually doing things iteratively and doing things in a smaller way, like short sprints, and getting feedback, understanding what customers really want. I mean, from the retail hit that they've had, they've finally come to realization that actually, for years we've been saying customer is king. Now it actually is. They can just disappear, go wherever they want to, So there's a lot of pressures and a lot of things that are happening that are making them think about better ways or faster ways of doing things. And Agile itself lends itself really well to doing all of that. It's about responding to change. It's about doing things small bite sizes, getting feedback quickly, having clear visions, clear sight, collaborative people, high performing to get there, And so it's all kind of leaning more towards that need and realizing that actually, if you look at the manifesto and just replace some of the words, like replace software for solution, and suddenly the whole thing fits for anything. So I think pressure's driving them, more businesses towards thinking about Agile.
No, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And it's been so popular, right? Like if I look at the clients I've been working with, you got like oil and gas companies, consumer industries, people that don't really work in IT at all. It's not their business to do software or anything like that, right? But you walk in the corridors and you just hear people going, "Oh, I'm going to a sprint review. Oh, how was the retrospective?" This is kind of the normal lingo these days, right? And for people that are not in this field of software development necessarily, right? So it's kind of just the way people work, it seems, nowadays, right? Regardless of whether there's a lot of digital work going on because we live in a digital, everything is software driven more and more, but it's just become the normal way of doing things almost, right? So it's in a way not surprising that it's kind of spreading out of just the digital world to other aspects as well, right? Anyway, I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's certainly something I've seen.
Yeah.
That it's not just this weird language that geeky computer programmers talk about, right? It's almost everyone knows what a sprint is, and
exactly. And I think what I really enjoyed was when I was learning all about Agile, and one of the passages that I read was something that Jeff Sutherland wrote, which he was describing that when he and Ken Schreiber came up with the concept of Scrum in particular, just as an example, the idea was to look for a way of, I suppose codifying is probably the closest word we can use, but codify the way humans naturally wanted to work together, which is in this way of collaborating and iterating and adapting and all of those things. And then I sort of immediately started to think about how else we can use it for other things, again, outside of IT, as you both mentioned, and then outside of the world of work. I've got that crazy story about my fence panels and how that was done, doing things in an agile way. it just, yeah, which was, I don't know if have I told you that story, the famous fence panel. So we had
No, what's that? Go on.
we
Tell
had
us.
just very quickly, we had these had to change the fence panels, and some of them were really quite dire and falling to pieces, and some of them were still, you know, very much stuck and not wanting to move. And we ordered these fence panels, and when they arrived, they were just so heavy that my wife and I, between us, struggled to put them in ourselves. You know, have to lift these 6-foot fences 6 feet in the air and drop them in. And we were just going like, this is absolutely nuts. And of course, the instinct is, you know, the waterfall way of doing things would be, right, you know, get rid of all the fences that are there, and you know, create the gaps, then bring all the other fences and then start slotting them in from one end and go to the other end. But something in my brain was screaming at me to say, do not under any circumstances do that. So we decided to basically experiment, and we said, okay, let's see if we can do one together. And part of the fence sits against our house, so we could actually use the wall of the house as the third person to balance this thing, and do all these things. So we managed to get about 3 in first time round, and then we had another person who was around a few days later, and we were able to get a few more in, and so on. And so we literally did it in an incremental way, learning our way as we went along. And then when I saw, David, your what's the difference between iterative and incremental, and I saw your Mona Lisa thing, I just thought, brilliant. Yeah, so that was that crazy little story.
That's a good point, As. I mean, don't we do everything like this? You know, I said the other day to you, I think, about cooking. You know, when you're cooking something, you use an ingredient, and then you taste it, and you decide whether you want more or less of it. Well, it's less, obviously difficult, but you kind of use that feedback to feel your way into the next iteration. And a number of times people have cooked things and said, oh, next time I'm going to do this, or next time I'm not going to do that. That's your learning, that's the retro. And so we do it, we just don't label it.
No, exactly. And I think, and talking about cooking, when you mentioned that, actually, it just took me straight back to literally my first few days of learning about Agile. And this good friend of mine came over, and he basically said, Alistair, I can explain it to you. Basically, if you're building the kitchen, right, you need to do that kind of waterfall, because you can't iterate on some of that stuff. You need to know in advance what you're going to do and where you're going to put things. But when it comes to cooking, I mean, if it doesn't work out, you throw it away and you start again. You know, and for me, that imagery was just perfect to understand sort of that difference of, you know, and when you talked about the incremental, my brother cooks like that, it very much so. He kind of adds a bit, tastes it, adds a bit more, and it's just brilliant. Just such a cool way. You have a plan and you have an idea, don't you, of where you want to go with it, but you then just see what emerges.
Yeah, it's not quite like the Friends mince pie episode, is it? You still have a vision that makes some kind of sense. I don't know if you guys remember the mince pie.
I don't remember that one, no.
So Jennifer Aniston's character, I can't remember her name. She makes a mince pie, but she uses mince as in blackcurrants.
Yes, that one.
Because she thought it's like, well, that's what mince is, isn't it? But
she uses meat mince, doesn't she?
Yeah, it's so funny. But yeah, I mean, so Giles, the rest of you, what have you got experiences of actually applying Agile in non-business, non-technical? Everything's underpinned by technology. I appreciate that, but I'm talking about pure business. Is there evidence of that?
Giles, do you want to go? You're very welcome.
Yeah, I suppose the only anecdote I have outside of just the normal working environment is those. I have a friend who is an estate agent, and he's known for many years. I obviously bang on about this thing called Agile, and he actually took it upon himself to actually go and do a Scrum Master course. And I think he did it back in about 2014, 2015. Bear in mind, he's an estate agent. Okay, so his world is obviously buying, selling houses, the facilitation of that between everybody. obviously, especially the rental properties as well, the facilitation of all of that as well. And a lot, just with many sort of small organizational outfits, they usually sort of set themselves quarterly targets and sales targets that they have to meet, and achieve those kinds of outcomes, shall we say. And he actually went, as I said, and did this course, and came back, and he wasn't a master of it, as we all joke and say after 3 days of doing it, but he had an appreciation of I suppose a different mindset, a different way of working. And the biggest thing was, and we obviously heard about it at the start, this sort of this ideology that a lot of people now, even if they don't understand the mechanics of particular frameworks or ways of working, at least understand some of the buzzwords around retrospectives and reviews and other things, and feedback, being a lot quicker and a lot faster. And he applied this at the practice that he was at, and he actually put into place 2-week iterations. And the idea was that they would actually set themselves goals for 2 weeks and actually understand what they were actually going to achieve, and have a proper review and retro at the end of the 2 weeks in his organization. They all thought he was bonkers to begin with. And of course, this was just an extension of, him listening to me banging on in pubs and with other groups of friends, or when he came over for dinner, etc., etc. And the idea that actually, he said the business changed near enough sort of overnight, within 2 or 3 different iterations, the feedback, the learnings they had from it, the sort of different things that were happening seasonally as well. I mean, this is obviously all pre-COVID. I mean, I'm going back 2018, 2019. But the point being was, they changed their entire sort of modus operandi of this kind of quarterly sales cycle to actually receiving the feedback as quickly as possible in process. So they truly understood where they could pick up some slack, where they actually realized they were trying to overextend or do too much. They were able to have honest and open conversations as well with the team, as a team should, to sort of call out, where somebody's being an idiot, or actually where somebody needs support or help, or whatever that piece in that retrospective field is. And he said it literally just changed their business overnight. And all of a sudden they had more people coming on wanting to do rentals with them. Their sales were starting to grow. I mean, not exponentially, and it wasn't some sort of, radical evolution of the way of working, and this has to now be the de facto book of doing estate agent buying and selling, for the future. But within his particular office of his particular estate agent firm, they were suddenly beating the competitions in other towns by sort of simply applying new ways of working, new practices, new mindsets, which I just thought was awesome.
I think that brings in other concepts too, doesn't it? Like lean. I mean,
correct.
By doing the way that they were doing it, they were becoming more laser sharp on what really value driven needed to be. Whereas
Correct.
before, I think, back to the point earlier, Alistair, there's a lot of people, a lot of teams, a lot of companies do actually think about how their people are working and what they do. So they kind of do the retros. They just don't do them in a formal kind of structured way. They still think about what values can we bring in, how can we make people work better together, and how can teams evolve. And they do that based on learnings. It's not just governance and rules. They just do it from, well, that didn't work, can we just change that? We've been doing that. Sorry, Stephen, I think you had one, didn't you?
No. Well, thanks, Alkesh. I've just been listening to the conversation, and just to provide a little bit of counterpoint, as perhaps I always might. The most agile organizations out there, regardless of their field, don't mention agile at all. They don't talk about the fact that they use agile to achieve anything. They don't talk about their iteration. They don't talk about their learnings. They're just a successful organization that improves over time. And I think that's part of where this question always puzzles me a little bit, because I've had this conversation about where should we use agile outside of IT, because agile is just for IT, isn't it? It depends on what your definition of agile is. If you're talking about XP, let's say, then maybe we'll find less uses for that kind of rigor and the specific tenets of a particular process. But if the intention is that as an organization, we want to be very conscious about what we're doing, move into a more empirical world such that we deliver more value for our stakeholders over time, then if that's where you're starting from, there's value in every space. The big one for me right now that I seem to be majoring on relates to OKRs and helping organizations with outcome-based planning. Sorry, not specifically the McKinsey outcome-based planning. I'm more an OKR kind of guy. But nonetheless, the idea of taking an iterative and an experimental view of the targets and the goals you're moving towards. We're talking about a scientific method, aren't we, all the time? So it is. Am I being very naive by just saying, where could you use it? Anywhere where there's benefit of experimenting. But in order to do that, you have to get past the concerns that people have about, I can't show you my work. So one last thing I was going to add, there's a movement around Agile in sales, which is a thing called Sway, if you look it up. And that's really interesting because it's based around the idea of effectively using Scrum in sales. But the big impediment, or rather the thing that the team has to overcome, is it works beautifully if they have shared goals. If you have a normal sales team where everybody's going after their own paycheck, nah. But as you do imagine, if the whole team are going for a goal together and are rewarded and are working together, then the emphasis is on making the team better. Then the principles of Scrum, of Agile, of experimentation, of iteration, of learning all apply incredibly well. And the performance gains that sales teams that have done that have seen are phenomenal. It just means that one individual might not get their Porsche when someone else does. Or rather, we're taking that off the table. We're talking about winning as a system.
Yeah.
So I come at it from more philosophically, I suppose.
Well, Stephen, that's an interesting point there. I wonder it because I'm with a client at the moment where they're driving from outcomes, OKRs, and converting them into trying to compare that to their current backlog. That I'm using terms again now, which I shouldn't be, because like backlog is an Agile term. Is it really? Is an outcome an Agile term? Is it, all the Agile stuff aside, you still need to know where you're going. So therefore it's an outcome. You still need to know what's of value. Otherwise it's the point of spending the money in it, right? So all of these things have been happening all the time. Agile comes along and labels it. In fact, I know companies that have said, do not mention the word Agile, do not mention the word sprint, do not just talk about what you're going to do when and how long. And yes, cadence and synchronization, but let it happen naturally, organically, rather than labeling it and forcing people. And I buy that because otherwise it becomes, if you follow these 10 steps and you call it these things, suddenly the world's going to work for you.
The magic bullet, the silver bullet.
Exactly.
Well, it's the cargo cult, isn't it? The typical the shuhari thing, right? Where if let's adopt the practices because other people do it and it seems to work, so let's do the same, right? And it's the classic cargo cult thing, right? We don't have teams, we have squads. Okay, well,
for God's sake,
what's the difference? You still have a team, right?
Yeah, because I think as well, it's like, how prescriptive do you want to be? And to me, being too prescriptive has never felt particularly adaptive. That, if you're very prescriptive, I'm going to use a word other than Agile, but and so when you look at some of these, I think the more prescriptive it is, obviously less it's going to be it's going to be applicable to general situations. And you touched on that point there, the Spotify thing, where people they've exactly done that. They've taken something that's not relevant for them, for their organization, and then it's not worked, and then Agile becomes a swear word. Don't mention Agile, Alkesh. Just go and of course what you're trying to do is you're trying to change your mindset. We always seem to come back to this point, is that if they want to be competitive and still be in business and grow in 5 or 10 years time, look how fast things can change from unexpected events such as COVID. How fast can you adapt?
Yeah, absolutely.
The words that we should be using, because I do think it's applicable. I don't actually think, though, in every situation, though, there might be, I think actually, Giles, you've probably said this, or you've probably said this before, but I mean, if you've got a particular type of organization that is where, that there aren't unknowns, everybody's got a common understanding of the technology, I think that's Stacey's thing, isn't it? And everyone's got a common understanding of what we're trying to do. If that's really truly common, then why need to change it? As I said, change is going to be less often. And so maybe not every single organization, but everybody's kind of think, how can we do this thing more efficiently? And everyone says, oh yeah, Agile's for software, by the way. It's like, and then we've all been talking about manufacturing, and even before then, some of the models we spoke about last time, which I won't go into now. But so it's interesting that I think almost IT has given Agile a bad name, perhaps.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also because people look for recipes, right? They just want the solution. Give me the solution. Or is this the recipe for? Okay, I'll apply it then, and let's see.
1911, right? That would have worked, wouldn't
it? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just want recipes, so they take the Spotify one or Scrum or whatever recipe they can find, right, and then run with it. And but what I always say is that people they should become a learning organization. Never mind Agile, right? If you're not a learning organization, and they are not if they're just looking for a recipe, then they're by definition almost not a learning organization, right? That
you don't
want to find the solution and apply it and be done with it, right? So there's the antithesis of trying to have this learning aspect. Right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And for all of that, of course, you need people to have a deep understanding of what it is that you're trying to do, so that you can have those conversations. And Rachelle, as you said, you can have the conversation where you say the words don't matter, but kind of words do matter, because words create images and they are shortcuts for understanding. So, I use the example of, you may call it a to-do list. I'm going to call it a product backlog. And the reason I'm going to call it that, even though there probably is no product as such, is because that helps my mindset to think of that as a list of items that we will happily move around. We're not going to complete everything, and all the things that infers. Whereas if I have a to-do list in my head thinks a to-do list is something which must be completed.
A value backlog would be a better name for it, wouldn't it?
I think some companies, like we spoke the other day about middle management and the sticky middle and all of that kind of stuff. I wonder if there's a movement in these organizations that needs to create their own taxonomy. So things like they'll take a bit of Spotify, they'll take a bit of Safe, they'll take a bit of different kind of frameworks out there and make their own, or even create something of their own, because they feel a necessity to survive. And that
has to be the natural progression. That has to be that next piece. You don't. Far too many organisations over the last 20 years have sort of said, right, or somebody senior in the organisation has gone, right, we're going to do Safe. I'm not Safe bashing, but I'm just going to take it because it's enterprise and that's where I need to work. And the idea is that, of course, you take the company, and what you do is you crush the company into this way of working, fundamentally changing or trying to change parts of the organization that is just not ready for change, it doesn't necessarily have the appetite, isn't supported on its change journey, hasn't gone through any sort of changes to target operating model, organizational design to support it to do that. Instead, what you need to be doing is taking that organization and kind of going, well, how do we actually help that achieve those successful business outcomes? What are those things? What ways of working are out there across the organization to remove the waste and process, to remove the trade-offs and the handoffs we have, to remove the silos, to get everybody to come together as a sort of a better community? And you mold something around the organization that's taking the very best of this or that or that or this. And again, it doesn't matter what the vernacular is. Choose the vocab and the vernacular that's right for the organization, so that, again, you're not upsetting anybody by particularly being prescriptive about using a particular frame word or terminology or whatever it is. Try and get an understanding of what's best for that organization, looking at the external pressures that organization is actually suffering at that point in time to understand how it's going to achieve that successful outcome. I've seen far too many, especially the enterprise organizations, suddenly being crushed into a way of working when they're in the tens of thousands of people large, and they're just not ready for it because it hasn't been adapted to them. They've had to adapt to it, and that is the wrong way round.
Yeah.
I was thinking about a
completely
qualifier on
agree.
the actual question now, in terms of, is it for everyone as well? I like what David was saying there, because I tried to read the fifth principle. I think it was it the fourth? Yeah, the fifth.
No, the fifth
principle.
principle.
I got about 50 pages in and another shiny book came along. But basically, I like that because in a way, well, you can qualify. No, it's not for non-learning organizations. I mean, by definition, if you're not prepared to experiment, if you're not prepared to fail, it's probably not good for you. If it gives you benefits, then great, but it's probably not for you because it's going to create more contention in a non-learning organization.
So
And
it's not for soon to be extinct organizations.
Oh, yeah,
it's true, isn't it? I think if you're not learning, if you're not a learning organization, then you're a fixed mindset. You're not a growth mindset. You're in that position where you think you've got the right answers, and yeah, absolutely, Alistair, they won't be around.
Yeah, and it's great. All those stats we were looking at last time in terms of numbers of companies that are going to be on the stock market in 10 years' time, and why almost it's the USP perhaps of the organization now, of companies now. If you sort of look at the Amazon as a really extreme example, but almost the USP isn't the products they're shipping or the products even that they're necessarily creating, but often the way that they're creating them so that they're finely attuned to the clients. And that is the USP. That is often a differentiator between a company that's going to survive and, as you say, one that isn't going to survive, and one that's going to actually overtake and somehow be more adapted to the market share.
It's the speed. It's the speed as well, isn't it?
Absolutely is. It absolutely is. And the efficiency though becomes so important. So the companies that are just going along, same old processes, they're 5 versions out of date, basically.
It's an Amazon versus Blockbuster, isn't it? I mean, Amazon went that from a bookshop to what they do today is just phenomenal, just based on the business side of it. But their change is by the second. Every few seconds, they're releasing something new on the systems. It's just that adaptation can only come from that kind of mindset, I think. And whereas Netflix, I heard Netflix tried to buy Blockbuster or pair up.
Other way around.
Other way around, was it?
Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy them and said, "Nah, that's never catch on," or at least that's the urban myth.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alkesh, I wrote over you.
No, it's fine.
No to people.
Yeah, but that's the point. Yeah, it's this that people think that they've already got the magic bullet, the silver bullet, as Giles said.
Stephen, you had something.
I think thank you, Alistair. I think that's the key point I just want to emphasize, and maybe quote a little bit of Dave Snowden here as well. There's whatever the model is for our organization, or start with Deming even, our organization is set up to get the results that we get, right? So there is no absolute model for any one thing. The David Snowden thing I was going to pick up on was around his example that he talked around the checklist kind of manifesto world. This idea that if you get a checklist in a hospital, you've massively transformed what happened in the hospital and the results. And his contention, which I must say I support, is that actually what's happening in a surgery is you've got thousands of years of medical knowledge combined. You've got deep education, deep experience in all of the people, clear practices, technology, all of these things, and a checklist. And that provides a little bit of extra stuff to suggest that you can take that checklist and then suddenly become successful because you've got that one component. It's the same way as saying that I sell stuff online, therefore I'm Amazon. Oh, rubbish. There's so many things in here. OKRs being another classic example. I found myself gritting my teeth and I saw one of the software, I won't mention their name, but one of the applications out there have rewritten their OKR white paper to encourage you to buy their software to manage your OKRs. And they put a comment in there about use the framework that made Google successful. Words to that effect.
My God.
And I just found myself just livid. Google are not successful because of OKRs. Okay, OKRs have helped to the tapestry of their organization, but something about dominating a niche and a growing industry, making lots of money, and therefore being able to do lots of other things, that's probably more the reason why Google are successful. OKRs are just one particular tool that they happen to use in their toolbox.
Even those constantly change, Stephen, like OKR, the objectives, according to Intel, the way it was originally done, 30, 40 years ago, was objectives are written in SMART form. I hate that term because SMART, for a start, is fixed. It's very, very old. We talk
Yeah.
about clear objectives today in terms of Agile. We talk about collaborative, limited in scope, to be able to get it done. Empathetic, is it actually going to give somebody joy? Is it delivering some sort of value? Is it appreciable? Do you understand enough about it? And most importantly, the R is refinable. Is it adaptable? And SMART is not adaptable. It's fixed.
Completely. This is all links to the outcome in the end.
Yes.
And I know that I'm a one-trick pony when it comes to this stuff, but that's definitely to the question of, can Agile techniques help you in an organization outside of Agile? Yeah, of course. It depends on what outcome you want. And I love the point you made, Rachelle, about you have to be by implication, a learning organization in order to adopt them.
And I wonder,
being Agile
Stephen,
doesn't mean adopting a framework.
And I wonder, Stephen, is this magical thinking almost? Like people like, there must, like, I have no idea how to run my business. There must be something out there that's just magic that's just going to do it.
Looking for it, yeah.
I don't know, like that recipe, like looking for that recipe. Just give me the recipe, and then I just have to follow it, and then life will be easy.
Is it a human thing though, that we are drawn to formulas and frameworks and what is is it and is it because we basically, as most humans, I mean, obviously psychologists around the room, around the campfire, will know more about this, but instinctively it feels we're all a little bit unsure of ourselves, but if we can grab hold of a checklist, we somehow brim with confidence, don't we?
And I have a funny story on this, because maybe a week or two ago, we had a friend, we came over, and they had a puppy, a new puppy. He's I don't know, 10 weeks, maybe 10 weeks old or something. And he was kind of biting on everything. And every time I stopped him, I just went, and he would stop and look at me. Right? And then my kid, she's 9 years old, and she looked and said, "Oh, that's what you need to say." And I went, no, that's not so much. It's not the that's not the magic term that dogs somehow understand. It's the tone of voice. It's the fact that it was snappy. It's the fact that it's not the It's like, invent your own word. I said to her, just say no or something. But it has to be snappy. It has to catch the attention. But it's not the word. It's not magic. She was looking for that magical term, because she said, before I tried to stop the dog, and I said, no, don't do this. But it was a very kind of voice. It wasn't snappy enough, and the dog just didn't care, right? But she thought it was that magical recipe thing that she had to somehow find,
We perpetuate this, though. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Dunning Kruger effect. Yeah, it's basically that everybody gets to that Mount Stupid very quickly because they think they're certified, they've found that recipe, they've been taught it, and therefore they're the experts now. No experience, no ability, no understanding, really, to your point as to how deep they understand this stuff. It's just they got a badge, they passed an exam, therefore they're an expert, and they go and try and deliver it to find that actually they're not, and then they go into that kind of lull for a while.
It's worse than that, Alkesh. I think it's I mean, it's not the fact that they've got some qualification and it suddenly they try to rubber stamp with the fact that they're the experts. I think there's a lot of executives out there who literally are sort of wearing the badge of tenure of duration working, and they use that as somehow the thing that I know best. They also then don't want help, or they become the sort of the higher they've gone through that sort of hierarchy, the less and less they actually want to ask someone for help. And you will often find, and I've worked in some insanely large enterprises and some incredibly small startups. It's often the sort of middle management, senior middle management, who are the ones who are crying out for support, who in years gone by will have gotten change management consultants, those types of practitioners to come in to try and help take the organization to the next level. It's never usually, in my humbled experience, the executives who are the ones who are going, hire in consultants, let's get some change management people in. you know, this kind of organizational agility is only the next evolution of sort of change management coming into organizations. Yet I still don't feel it's going to be those executives that are going to be the ones, for the large part, asking people like us to come into organizations and try and make a sort of a real, help them make a real change to achieve those successful business outcomes that they're all wanting to do, and all probably can do, but they just don't know how to. And so some guy sat at the very top in his ivory tower is unfortunately sort of just going, no, we'll do it my way. I've got 35 years of doing this. I know how to do it. It's fine. Yeah, what you did 35 years ago is not what actually organizations and ways of working and industry need you to do it 35 years later.
It probably stopped working 34 years ago.
Yeah.
But many of the execs do have exec coaches, because they need that guidance to understand how the hell to work with today's people, because the organization underneath them has changed. They can't cope with it.
And the expectations, just in defense of executives everywhere, it's lonely.
It is lonely.
There's huge peer pressure, huge imposter concerns and all the rest of it. And do you know, we're asking these leaders in many of our cases to go and coach their people. Never, ever, ever hire a coach that doesn't have a coach themselves, because by implication, they don't really believe it. Yeah. So I think it's essential, because you need that counterpoint, because no one else will do that safely with you.
I have three coaches, actually. I have three. I've got a lady's taking me under her wing for my coaching, leadership coaching business, and it's quite extraordinary. As a plug, superhumanleader.com is going to be Superhuman Leader, and it's about this kind of thinking that I'm going to try and really focus on with also systems, holistic systems analysis, to actually, systems design to make sure that every aspect falls into place. So I've got that. I've got a life coach, and I'm doing business coaching, leadership coaching at Henley, so I have a coach there too. So I couldn't agree with you more, because actually that's where it starts, because you've got to become a learning organization. If you're going to become a learning organization, something has to change inside your head to see things differently. Otherwise, you're going to be statically a non-learning organization. So totally agree.
Rachelle, last time when we all spoke, we spoke a lot about how it's all about the people and the culture, and it's regardless of the business, whether it's IT or pure business or finance or hospital or whatever, it's all about the people. The people make the things happen for people. And as a result, we're wondering whether Agile fits for other people outside of IT or other things. Well, of course it does, because it's all about the people. They all still work on people, don't they?
Well said. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it makes me think of, it's a slight tangent, but so so outside of the corporate world, right, at home with family and kids, and we at some point I started to put like some kind of a Kanban board, for the kids, and the homework and chores and stuff like that, and what we need to buy, and so it's very simple, to do, doing, done kind of thing, just to keep track of everything that's going on, because it's a bit manic sometimes. There's so much going on, and then surely but slowly, the kids, right, they started to realize that whatever you put on the to-do column, it happens. It gets done. And then one day we get there, and then we see on the board ice cream.
Oh,
buy ice cream on the board, and like, who buy ice cream? Who put buy ice cream? Nice. And they were like,
they prioritized it,
because if you put stuff on the board, stuff happens. So we put buy ice cream on there, and it just happens, and that's how we get ice cream, isn't it?
It is magic after all.
But it was a wonderful example, I thought, of they saw the how would you say, the value of the board, right? That if it actually happens, right? The things get done, and it was kind of a, how would you say, a culture hack in a way, right?
Yeah. Because
they started. You see so many teams in the corporate world where they have a board because for the sake of having one, but they don't really use it. You have to force them to update it, or it's never up to date. It's not really used.
But what
it's
fun
just
to
this
be
artifact. Sorry, what?
David, I was just saying, what fun to be learning that at such a young age, because that's
Yeah,
something like a skill that will be going on forever. And it reminds me, I learned in my last year at university, I learned about mind maps. Tony Buzan's mind map sort of system totally saved me, because I spent 3 years doing very little at university, and I needed a decent outcome, and literally totally saved my life, I think, in terms of my career and everything else, learning that. And I was just, for me, it's always been magical and always been amazing. Of course, our kids learned that at school. I'm being like, oh, on the one hand, fantastic. On the other hand, maybe you don't appreciate it as much as I do.
Because you need to experience the negative,
but,
right?
I think. But no, that's brilliant, David. Awesome.
One of the things that I think we're missing in the change program that causes these sort of people not to think about becoming a learning org, is the unlearning. But they're set in a way. They've been doing this for a while. Who's to say that they're doing it wrong? Yes, they need to change to respond to change quicker and to survive and all of those things. We can see that because we're in the business. They can't, because they're plodding along doing their job. So rather than just suddenly changing their behaviors and try and get this new culture going, they need to kind of, I think we said the other day, what's in it for me? Yeah, they need to understand what's in it for them. They also need to understand in the transition, they need to undo what they've learned. Reminds me of that guy with the bike. Remember the handlebars go one way?
Backwards bike.
Yes,
the backwards bike. Yeah.
Neuro pathways, fantastic. Trying to get. We as coaches, I think we need to understand that they need to go through that phase.
And it's the phrase, I like the phrase, is what got you here won't get you there. So
yes.
what, right? So what, it's the same at the different level, right? But like you're new to things, okay? You're new to Agile, you apply Scrum, and that's working really well. It made you really much better at what you do. But then maybe at some point you need to let that go, right? And get even better at agility. Yeah. Just like with what you were saying, Stephen, earlier, right? With the whole Agile thing got you there, okay, got you here, that's fine. But now maybe you need to let go. Maybe you need to become this learning, or forget Agile, right? It's bigger than that. It's about outcomes, it's about value and all of that.
I think this is where the challenge comes. And certainly in my work that I do, the leaders, the organizations that I work with, back to a point you made earlier, Alistair, about is there a view of some magic in here? Sorry, David, you mentioned that originally, but I was thinking about the Adam Smith stuff, the invisible hand, and the idea in here that we've got overall a system will tend to good and will kind of look after itself and so on. And you don't need to worry about deep regulation and all that sort of thing, because, dad has already got someone somewhere, dad or mum has got the answer to this stuff. Look at Rousseau, the kind of philosophy there. You've got the same kind of thing where we've said that actually, if you give everybody complete freedom to do things, they'll all make the best choices in the interests of the people and everything will be fine, won't it? The distinction in both of those, or the thing in there, is that we're relying on some invisible force to keep us good, I suppose, where the implications of this Agile organization is all actually about being very visible and very conscious of everything that's going on around us. That's the advantage that you have. The reason it comes from software, of course, is because of all the uncertainty, or I would say anyway, because of all of the uncertainty in there, not being able to see what was going on is a distinct disadvantage. But that's true of so many other things as well. So not being able to see whether or not the thing that you've just produced was actually of any value, not being able to see the performance and so on. You're in an industry that benefits from radical transparency of what it is that's going on around you.
But the environment needs to accept that you will make those mistakes and learn from them, as opposed to, who's going to pay for that mistake then? That kind of moving away from that threat to reward is an environmental change. I'm not talking Agile now, we're talking behaviors and cultures and organizational culture. They need, that needs to transform.
Keep waving this book around, actually, and almost start with this with subjects, because in a sense that's the fabric that's changing underneath, that's driving a lot of the stuff. Like you were saying earlier on, I think someone was saying it's about how fast you learn. The organization that learns the fastest is going to be the most successful. I've stolen that from somewhere.
I'm wondering whether, picking up on the invisible hand, Stephen, is whether we want to change that to the transparent hand.
Yeah.
You definitely get Agile stuff in there, aren't you, Alistair?
Well, I'm just thinking it for me that transparency, which basically part of it is transparency helps keep everybody honest. It helps it helps build trust. It helps do all those things that we do. So we don't have to just hope that everybody is going to do the right thing at the right time with the right intent. But when you're working in a transparent way, it's kind of, in a good way. There's no place to hide. But in that. So I don't know, a silly connection in my head. Sorry.
It's
No,
like
it's a huge connection.
Yeah, no, but is it innate? Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out, because invisible means something you can't see, and transparency is something almost you can, because you're sharing where you're going on. So I wonder if the connection there is, as Dave was saying earlier on, I think there is a force. There's a force of change that's going on, and when you look back in time, you can see it, and that's almost the only time that you can see it clearly. And you might be able to see a potential trend to that, but it's time is change, and that's invisible in a sense, but it's got amazing impact. So
it's a huge connection, right? Because isn't it the most common objection to self-organization, right? Like people would say, well, you just hope people will just do the right thing. It's like, well, it's not quite hope, is it? It's not based on hope.
I think
right? It's the transparencies that will help you.
No, it's absolutely right. Giles has got a brilliant, picking up on your point about the force, that imagery of the force that you create. Giles has got a really interesting story that he told me a couple of weeks back. The one where that lady comes down the stairs and comes into the room and then turns around. Do you remember that one? What was that?
Oh yeah, no, that was an organization I joined as a technology director, and that was inheriting a team in London of about 75 technologists, every type of role you could imagine. And they were essentially 75 individual teams, all being told what to do, just pure command and control. I mean, literally requirements, people shouting at them on a daily basis, things turning up on the back of cigarette packets, post-it notes. I'm not joking, it was horrendous. But it was like the married effing Celeste. And I arrived and no one said boo to a goose. And I was really worried and sort of thought, wow, this is crazy. 3 months, that's all it took, giving the people that autonomy, accountability, ownership, the people who were closest to the outcomes for the organization, the successful outcomes, those guys and girls getting the accountability and ownership for it. And I mean, 3 months later, the cacophony of sound of co-creation, people standing at whiteboards, designing, architecting things, because people were limiting the interference and the attention diversion going on as well. And there was a proper, let's use Rachelle's phrase earlier, a sort of value backlog of things that people were aspiring to achieve, those things which we were sort of putting monetary value on that were going to move a needle for the organization. Somebody from the finance team walked down the back stairs onto our floor, and pardon my French, but went, F me, there's noise here. And she just sort of stood there looking absolutely perplexed across the floor, as if there was, just people talking and co-creation and people standing up and moving around. And it wasn't any longer like the Mary Celeste. It was just a moment of beauty. I kind of was like, drop the bike, job done. That's it. I can go and pack my bags now. I can move on.
Giles,
it was an amazing moment.
Do you wonder if there might have been a certain kind of manager style in there that came along and saw that noise going on and that collaboration and looked at it and said, how can anything get done in this chaos?
Oh, 100%.
I want silence. I want to go back to, because
the
that's
CEO
what
did that every single day.
Okay.
I've told you the stories before of where that same CEO in a town hall turned around and said, I hate this working smarter moniker. I want everybody to work harder rather than smarter, and
Oh, Christ.
whole avenue of resignations from people across the entirety of the organisation. And yeah, I mean his style was pure command and control, micromanagement.
Well, that's some feedback, right? If everybody leaves.
The burnout chart, yeah, isn't it? The burnout chart.
Instant feedback.
Yeah,
Wow.
but giving those people, you know, that same team went from having delivered 12 product releases in the 12 months previous to same team 109 12 months later.
Wow.
It's incredible, and it's just that the power it releases, these ways of working, regardless of what we call it, the power it releases, the energy it releases in human beings, I think is just magical. And you know, taking the fact that my fire is dying and I need to move on, but it just, what's incredible is that all of us have had incredibly long days today. I know this because we've been trying to get hold of folks, but we've had incredibly hard long days, and yet here we are late into the evening, and we're still fired up and excited about this. And I think that sort of, if leaders recognize that this sort of energy and this sort of release of power is something that will happen throughout their teams and throughout their organizations, when they flip that switch and start moving in this direction, I think it's going to be amazing. I can't wait to catch up with everyone again very soon, guys.
I was just going to add just before, because that was just to join things together in terms of you know, we were talking about this phrase agile and not mentioning agile and stuff like that, and organizations that would find it helpful. I think organizations that would be prepared to do some systems thinking, and they do the systems thinking exercises, then whatever processes drop out of that will probably, you know, be right for them, and they'll have agile properties, of course. Yeah. I'm sure. I'm you know, surprised that they didn't, but I would think that would, you know, be a first thing to kind of go in with.
I think what quite human nature is that, especially adults, we tend to overcomplicate things. We tend to take something very simple as a concept, simple kind of thing, and feel like it needs to be more than it is. And to I don't know what it is, whether it's credibility or kudos, or whether they think they're going to get something because they
people
make it.
Holding on to power as well, because they think if they're the one who has the knowledge behind it, or they're the only one, then they hold all the power.
Yeah, and I think the opposite is true too, Giles, where if we do take a concept and say, no, it's really simple, it's so easy, they feel stupid because it is really common sense. It's that stupid, that simple. Why didn't you do it? Why didn't you get it? Right? But it's also this kind of, oh no, it'll never work here. You don't understand our business. We are really complicated. We have this and this going on. You're okay, I'm thinking it's still people still needed. You still need all the same things that we spoke about before. But I think it's that, you know, I go back to this kid idea, like a child picks up a cardboard box and it's a castle. And for all intents and purposes, it's a castle.
I like that, yeah.
At a certain age, that castle becomes a cardboard box. And when that reality, when you start behaving that things are as they are and that's all you're going to get, that's when it all goes wrong. So we all need to become kids again. We all need to keep things really simple. You know, I love the marshmallow game, you know, the build the highest tower. Yeah. Kids are fantastic at it because they prototype, they experiment, they fly, you know. And the adults in the room, they're drawing pictures and they're trying to architect this most beautiful kind of thing that falls over when they put the marshmallow on the top. And
I walked into a retro and did the marshmallow just as a kind of icebreaker thing. I'd never done it before, but I had to walk in. You know, sometimes you have to kind of go, no, I've done this tons of times before. I had to buy spaghetti, the string, the marshmallow and the tape and whatever. And there was I just measuring it all off as if I knew exactly what I was doing. But it was funny, once you got these teams together, the people dynamics change, people that you wouldn't have thought, you know, as you say, I mean, there's something that is architecting this marshmallow tower, and then other people are actually doing when normally they would be sort of telling it really. And so I go around looking at the psychology of the teams. I couldn't give a stuff how far they got the marshmallow off the ground, and some people might be cheating and putting it on chairs, so I'd mark them down on ethics, you know.
But it's the creative ones who become childlike and experiment, and they realize that this thing's heavy and spaghetti is not the best and it does need other stuff, and that comes from that trial and error, that learning.
Imagination. Imagination. We lose that ability to sort of, I haven't, obviously I'm a big kid, but you know, someone to lose that,
Don't grow up.
you know, imagination, you know, and that's how you get innovation. That's how you can see past certain things. But I think that's probably a interesting characteristic to measure some of these, you know, people who don't like change. You know, maybe another attribute of this is see where they are on the imagination score and see who you've got to kind of change and influence. But I love that. Stephen,
he's coming back in.
Yeah, I love the cardboard box. I shall use that now, Alkesh. Claim it. Put some commons license on it.
Oh, amazing stuff. Amazing. Listen, I'm gonna have to shoot, but I can't wait for us to sit down together and chat. There's so many. This has gone in so many wonderful directions, and I'm just absolutely loving it.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's great. Lovely talking to you all. And sorry about I've ruined it all. You have to cut me out of all of this because of my background. But I've got Adobe tools, so I can probably do something else.
We'll get that fixed for next time. We'll make it.
Alistair wasn't clear with the vision. He said fire, and you're sitting in front of a cast fire, probably.
Thank you, Alkesh, for saving me there. I've got a fire red.
Clarity and context again. Oh.
I really enjoyed talking to you all. Thank you so much.
We'll chat very soon. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Cheers. Take care all. See you later. Bye.